It may only be the start of June, but Middlesbrough fans are feeling very, very excited about what the summer could have in store. Last season was a real disappointment at the Riverside Stadium. The hope was after the finishing in the playoffs the previous season that Michael Carrick's team would be able to kick on and ultimately get into the top six and have another crack at reaching the Premier League once again. But things didn't quite go to plan. Last summer there was a huge turnover in players, a huge number coming in, a huge number leaving. And as those players were starting to settle into the team, Michael Carrick also had to endure one of the worst injury crises in the club's history, with a huge number of players missing large chunks of the season, which just completely derailed our form and led to a series of pretty inconsistent results. Somehow, Middlesbrough ended up finishing the season in 8th position, which was much higher than many expected. But obviously, they did only actually finish a couple of points away from the other top six as well, which was pretty miraculous in the end. But as far as Middlesbrough are concerned, it's very much looking ahead to the next season and looking to see what we can do in terms of pushing on and ultimately getting back into that top six again. Now, this kind of hope isn't based on absolutely nothing. There have already been a number of big decisions that have been made this summer, which are looking very, very encouraging indeed. So here we take a look at some of the reasons why Middlesbrough fans are so excited ahead of the new season. One of the biggest bits of news coming out of the club this summer is the news that Michael Carrick has penned a new contract at the Riverside Stadium. Now, Carrick had just 12 months remaining on his initial deal at the Riverside, and so he's taken a decision to extend that by a further 2 seasons. So that means that his contract with Middlesbrough runs up until the summer of 2027, giving him, but crucially, the club, a huge amount of certainty with regards to his position and long-term planning. Now, this is important for a number of different reasons. Obviously, as far as Middlesbrough are concerned, there is a new structure at the club that's come in over the last couple of seasons. Obviously, you've got Steve Gibson and Neil Bowser at the top. You've got Kieran Scott, who is the head of football operations / sporting director, or whatever you want to call the role. And then you've got Michael Carrick, who's the head coach. Now, all of these kind of parts need to slot in together. They need to have a strong working relationship. And the fact that Michael Carrick has extended his contract shows that that is a functioning relationship as far as he's concerned. He's confident that those above him, including Kieran Scott, who is in charge of transfers at the Riverside, are doing the best thing for him and building a team for the future that can challenge. Now, that's not to say that there hasn't been a huge amount of upheaval over the last few seasons. There's been a number of players who have come in. There's been a number of players who've left. There's been a huge reliance on loan signings over the last couple of seasons. There's also been a number of high-profile exits from the club as well over these last few seasons as well. You've got to think people like Jed Spence, Morgan Rogers in the summer just gone, Marcus Tavernier before that as well. There's others as well. But these are all high-profile exits, which will sort of, I guess, need to be approved by Michael Carrick as he's looking to build a squad moving forward. But the fact that Michael Carrick has chosen to extend his contract is massive from that point of view, because Michael Carrick, he's a Premier League legend. He's someone that everyone knows and everyone wants to play for because he comes across so damn well in interviews. He just comes across so chilled out and really just as a person that you would want to work for. And that is a huge pull for any player wanting to come into the club. So I think given that he's got, or that he did have just 12 months remaining on his contract, that could have been a little point of contention for players coming into the club. It's like, well, why should I sign for Michael Carrick if there's every opportunity that he could be leaving by next summer? It's also the case for the existing players in the squad. The players really enjoy playing under Michael Carrick, but are they going to be happy agreeing a new long-term contract when there's only reliance that he could be there for one more season? People like Riley McGree spring to mind, who he only has 12 months left on his contract. So I think for someone like him, penning a long-term deal at Middlesbrough, I'm not exactly sure whether that's going to happen, but the fact that Michael Carrick has committed his future for the long term shows that a real level of stability within the club, which could come in very, very handy. I think the other side of that argument, I guess, and another reason why it's so important is just how in demand top-level Championship managers seem to be at the moment. We've seen it in what has been a quite bizarre few weeks in football, really, with some of the names that have been linked to some of the top jobs in world football. We've seen Kieran McKenna, who obviously got promoted with Ipswich to the Championship and then again to the Premier League. He's done a stunning job, and he was heavily linked with the job at Manchester United, with Chelsea, with Brighton. I mean, it was widely expected that he was going to move on. I think at one point Brighton were really kind of closing in on that deal. He ultimately decided to stay at Ipswich to lead them into the Premier League, which I think was a great move. You've also seen people like Vincent Kompany, who have got promoted with Burnley out of the Championship, led them into the Premier League. Didn't really do a lot in the Premier League, but what happened was he was able to play, a non-compromised version of a possession-based, attack-minded style of play, which really caught the eye of Bayern Munich. Now he's the Bayern Munich manager. Enzo Maresca is another one. He only had one good season in the Championship. I know he's got a lot of pedigree behind him as a coach. He worked under Pep Guardiola at Man City, but as a head coach, just one good season in the Championship, and that was down to his style of play, something which Chelsea have clearly bought into after appointing him on a long-term deal. Now, Michael Carrick hasn't really been in that group of managers who've been linked with those top jobs. I think it came out a little while ago that Michael Carrick was on the verge of signing this new contract. So when it was announced, it wasn't a huge surprise. And it probably has been something that has been communicated to people that he's not going to be on the market for a new role. But it does show that increased level of interest in managers in the Championship is something which is likely to trickle down to Michael Carrick. I think something that has maybe worked in Middlesbrough's favour going into this summer is the fact that Middlesbrough weren't really in that promotion battle last season. We were never really in the top six. We never really looked like a side who were going to be going up to the Premier League, and so that kind of kept eyes away from Carrick and on the managers who were up more in the top 2, 3, 4 positions in the Championship. This season, should things go to plan, Middlesbrough should be right in there. They should be in the top 6 and they should be challenging for promotion, which does mean that Michael Carrick is likely to be getting a little bit more attention again. Clubs in the Premier League, as they sack managers, will be looking to the Championship to see if they can find someone who is going to be the next big star in management. And Michael Carrick, giving his profile as a manager and as a player previous to that with Manchester United, he is someone who's going to catch the eye for them. So this long-term deal, it's as well as Michael Carrick committing his future to the club and showing that he is fully bought into the project at the Riverside Stadium. It also offers Middlesbrough a degree of financial certainty as well, because the way compensation works is that let's say, for example, a Premier League club came in for Michael Carrick now, and we're going to try and coax him away after he's just signed his new contract. They would then have to pay the rest of his contract up, so they would have to pay 3 years worth of Michael Carrick's salary to get him out of the club. As a rough rule of thumb, there's often like bonuses and other financial elements involved in those deals, but that sort of means that with Michael Carrick penning a long-term contract with the club are also protected, because it means that any club in the Premier League or elsewhere would have to pay relatively top dollar to get him out of the club, which is great for the club, because it means that Middlesbrough are planning for the long term, and it means that they are protected should that happen, and it would mean that they would then have added funds to help them go and coax the right manager into the club should they need to. So all in all, Michael Carrick signing a new contract is just brilliant news for the club. It's brilliant news for the team. It's brilliant news for the club's hierarchy, and it just really signifies just how settled, I guess, that this Middlesbrough group is at the moment, because things are really looking up at the moment. And with Michael Carrick in charge, it feels like this upwards trajectory, the way that we've done business, which has been certainly productive and is starting to show signs of productivity, is something that we could really start to look forward to over the next couple of seasons. On the field, there's been a couple of really exciting deals to speak of as well. The first one that was completed was the deal to extend Johnny Howson's contract with the club for a further 12 months. Now, Howson isn't getting any younger. We have to be clear on that. He's a player that probably should have been pushed out of the first team a couple of seasons ago, had Middlesbrough's recruitment been up to scratch up until that point. But what we've seen from Johnny Howson over the last couple of seasons is a player who just continues to reinvent himself. He's a player who knows that he isn't getting any younger. He knows his limitations. He knows that he can't play every single week of the season or every single match of the season. But he's someone who is just such a model professional that he really is Michael Carrick's sort of eyes and ears on the field. Carrick's spoken about it before, about how important it is having Howson on the pitch, because he is he's obviously the club captain. as well. But he does often have conversations between Carrick and Howson at the training ground, just about football in general, about the team. And Michael Carrick really does look to Howson with a huge amount of respect and authority as well when he comes to making decisions with the team. Now, Howson, as I said, he's getting on. For the last couple of seasons, he has been signing these 12-month rolling contracts, which is certainly sensible, given his age. There's no kind of knowing, I guess, when there might be a somewhat steep decline in his well, probably not his technical ability, but his physical ability to compete at this level. I think any player, no matter how well they look after themselves, it will happen to them eventually. But Howson is, like I said before, a model professional, someone who looks after himself very, very well and looks just as fit as he ever has been, which means that the signs are good for Middlesbrough that he's going to be able to keep competing at this level. What the plan will probably be with Howson is that over the next 12 months, should the recruitment be right this summer, I will get onto this in a little bit, but the idea of signing a new central midfielder, whether it's a like-for-like replacement from Johnny Howson, the hope will be that Howson can sort of be eased out of the picture over the course of this 12 months, while still being a very, very big part of the match day squad and in the background as well. So I think signing Howson for another 12 months has been a massive coup. He's someone who, I'm sure he will have had offers from elsewhere. Like I said, I know that I know with his age and everything, but I think clubs in the Championship, everyone will be crying out for a model professional like Johnny Howson, someone who has done it year after year in the Championship. He also had a number of years in the Premier League as well, so he is a player of that high level, and he is someone that will really help Middlesbrough over the next 12 months as they look to kick on, as they look to as he looks to offer that sort of leadership to the group, and I guess for players who are coming in this summer, players who might be having to bed into life in the Championship or into Middlesbrough, he's going to be a massive part of that. The other deal that's been done in terms of an incoming is the deal to sign Luke Ayling on a permanent basis. Now, he arrived initially on a loan deal in the January transfer window. Looked a little bit short of match sharpness. I think Middlesbrough fans weren't entirely convinced in the first few weeks. I think they thought that his legs had gone in comparison to his days at Leeds when he was getting up and down the touchline for fun. He's obviously another player who is in his 30s now, so he is sort of in the final few years of his career at this sort of level. But what we did see from Luke Ayling was a player who got himself up to speed very, very quickly, found form very, very quickly, and was just an absolutely crucial part of Middlesbrough's team in those last few months of the season. He slotted into the right back role. For me, he's now our best right back at the club. He got himself up to full fitness. He provided plenty of assists as well, with his ability to get forward and put balls into the box. And for me, he's just been an absolutely crucial addition. I think as well as his technical ability and his ability to slot into that role and become our first choice right back, he's another player who is an absolute proven leader. He was one of the core group at Leeds United when they got promoted under Marcelo Bielsa, so he knows how to do it in the Championship. He knows how to get promoted. He's suffered his fair share of heartache as well. He's played in the Premier League in the last couple of seasons as well. Whether he's a Premier League level right back now, I'm not so sure, but he is someone who certainly will come into Middlesbrough with a huge amount of pedigree, a huge amount of clout and a huge amount of influence. He's a leader both on and off the pitch. He's a hugely likeable character as well. I think people have seen that with some of the interviews that he's done both while he was at Leeds and while he's been at Middlesbrough as well. He's a hugely personable guy. And someone who will be just a massive addition to that Middlesbrough dressing room. He's clearly slotted in so well already. He's kind of slotted into that kind of senior leadership group that's sort of forming at Middlesbrough alongside Howson and people like Darragh Lenihan and Tommy Smith as well, someone who will really lead from the front. And so I think for Middlesbrough, that deal was a huge one to get over the line. It's worth mentioning as well that there was reports that other clubs like Sheffield United were interested in signing Luke Ayling as well. Sheffield United obviously just coming down from the Premier League. They'll have a lot more money than Middlesbrough. They probably will have been able to make a better contract offer to him, but it just goes to show just how much Ayling must have enjoyed the last 6 months at the Riverside. and the way that he settled into the club. He was clearly very happy, and he's clearly seeing it as the right next step in his career. So yeah, that's a brilliant signing. So I think to have Howson and Ayling, it's just a couple of deals which form a really solid foundation for Middlesbrough going into the new season. I don't care who you are, I don't care what club you are, you need those experienced players who have been there and done it at this level to come in and provide that solidity, but also that kind of experience for when moments get tough, for when you go 1-0, 2-0 down in a game, so to have those kind of calm players who are in the dressing room say, don't worry, we've got this, we've been there, we've done it before. And that kind of personality in the dressing room, it's inspiring to the team, but it's inspiring to the fans as well, because you can trust these players to perform on the pitch, and you know that you're also getting players who are going to put in absolutely everything week after week as well. So I think as far as early deals have gone, Middlesbrough couldn't have done much better than getting these 2 deals signed. Obviously, Michael Carrick's extended his contract as well, and that for me means that Middlesbrough are in a really good position leading into the rest of the summer for any future signings that we do as well. Following on from that, another positive has been just how highly rated Middlesbrough's coaching staff seem to be by clubs around Europe. Now, while Michael Carrick has stayed put, he's signed his new contract, and there hasn't been really any talk of him moving on to other clubs. Middlesbrough's first-team coach Aaron Danks has been heavily linked with a job at Bayern Munich. Now, as I mentioned before, Vincent Kompany has been named as the new head coach of Bayern Munich. Thomas Tuchel left at the end of last season. Bayern finished third in the Bundesliga. I think they got to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, which has just clearly not been good enough for a club of that level. And a few people were a bit surprised when Vincent Kompany got the job there, given that Burnley got relegated last season. Now, a couple of people have been linked with jobs in his backroom team. Craig Bellamy is one of them. He worked under Vincent Kompany at Burnley, although he's also being lined up potentially for the senior job at Burnley as their head coach. But Aaron Danks is a head coach, not a head coach. He is a first team coach who is also being lined up by Vincent Kompany as a potential addition to that team. Now, Middlesbrough are in a position where, look, when Bayern Munich come knocking, it's very, very hard for a coach or for anyone to turn them down. They are one of the biggest clubs in world football. He'd be going in to be working with players like Harry Kane, Eric Dyer, Jamal Musiala, Thomas Muller, people like this, people who are at the real top end of the game. And so I think for Aaron Danks, it's always going to be a hugely appealing prospect. But Middlesbrough are doing what is just very, very admirable, in that they're a club who are really just trying to hold on to their key assets. They don't want to be losing a coach like Aaron Danks. He's a huge part of Michael Carrick's backroom team. Now, it remains to be seen whether he will move on. I personally think that it would be madness if he decides not to go to Bayern Munich or that move falls through, because it's such a big opportunity for him. And if he does go, he would go with my best wishes, and I'm sure he'd go with the best wishes of everyone else as well, because it's just such a big opportunity. But the fact that, first of all, that Bayern Munich are looking at one of Middlesbrough's coaches in the Championship as someone who could come in and help improve their players is a huge testament to Aaron Danks. But also the fact that Steve Gibson and the Middlesbrough hierarchy aren't just rolling over and letting him leave. They know the value of Aaron Danks as a coach. They know what he brings to the setup as, I guess, as a professional, but also financially as well. So there's an element of playing hardball there as well, because while there is, I guess, a pecking order in football, there is a food chain, and let's be frank, Bayern Munich are at the top end of that food chain, so they can go and they can poach coaches and players from the vast majority of other clubs, including Middlesbrough. But the fact that Middlesbrough are looking to keep hold of him and are looking to tempt him to stay at Middlesbrough, it's just a huge compliment to the club and what we're doing at the moment. We're clearly on the right track, I guess, in terms of developing players and developing coaches. If clubs such as Bayern Munich are coming in and they are expressing an interest in someone like Danks, it's clearly because he's doing something right, and it's clearly because Middlesbrough are doing something right as well, because their coaches are starting to catch the eye of clubs elsewhere. So, like I said, it remains to be seen whether he moves on or not. Obviously, I'd absolutely love it if he was to stay at Middlesbrough and stay as part of Michael Carrick's backroom team. But it'll be very, very hard to turn down a job with Bayern Munich. And if he does go, he would go with my best wishes. And what an amazing opportunity that would be for him. But as far as Middlesbrough are concerned, hugely positive that they are not giving up without a fight. They're looking to keep hold of him. They want him in the dugout going into the new season. And crucially, obviously, he's been a huge link with Aston Villa as well, who obviously there's been a huge number of dealings done over the last couple of transfer windows with Morgan Rogers and Finn Azaz and Cameron Archer previous to that as well. So it would be a huge miss if he was to move on. But yeah, Middlesbrough fighting very, very hard to keep hold of him, and hopefully he does stick around. One thing that Middlesbrough fans will be a little bit worried about going into this summer is the prospect of losing some of our star players. Now, Middlesbrough weren't on the top of their game last season by any means. Obviously, the club finished 8th in the Championship, and there was some hugely inconsistent performances. And you've got to say that over the course of the full campaign, there wasn't really anyone who stood out from August right through until May. People had little pockets of form. People like Lath kind of came into form in the last few months of the season. People like Hackney started well but suffered an injury. Other players kind of improved as the season went on. But that's not to say that Middlesbrough won't be fielding some calls this summer with a number of their top young players being linked with moves elsewhere. Now, that's all part of Middlesbrough's business model. Middlesbrough are in the business, as many other Championship clubs are, of signing players who can come in and develop within the team, improve the first team, of course, but ultimately are there to grow in value, to help grow the club and trying to progress them up the Championship and into the Premier League. But if nothing else, they're players who can be bought low, sold high. It's the old Moneyball business model that clubs like Brentford have made so successful over the last few seasons. And that's something that Middlesbrough are looking to do and do seemingly are doing quite well. We saw it with Morgan Rogers. He arrived for a minimal fee last summer. Was sold for 15 million in the January transfer window, which was a pretty tidy profit on a player who didn't look like the finished article, has only been at the club for 6 months as well. But Middlesbrough will be fielding calls for a number of their players this summer, given that the performances that they've put in. 3 of the players who have been heavily linked with moves away this summer are Rav van den Berg, Hayden Hackney, and Latte. Middlesbrough fans know exactly what these players are all about. They know just how talented they are. To run through, Van den Berg arrived last summer as a teenage prospect. He wasn't really expected to get anywhere near the first team, but due to the injuries that Middlesbrough suffered, he was sort of like thrown into the team. He played at left back, he played at right back. His natural role is at centre back, but such was the impressive nature of his performances. He kept that role as the season went on. He got better and better, stronger and stronger. Given his age, it's quite remarkable the level of composure and leadership that Rav van den Berg has. And he's someone who I personally think is destined for the very, very top of football. I think he'll be playing in the Champions League. Give it 5 years or so, he'll be right up there playing for one of the other top teams in the world. Now, at the moment, there's a real sort of confidence with Middlesbrough that they'll be able to keep hold of him. He's not the finished article by any means. I think next season could be a massive season for him, and he could be a huge player for Middlesbrough as we look to kick on in the Championship. Hayden Hackney is another one who I think many expected would definitely be moving on this summer. Being frank, I think if he'd stayed fit for the full season last season, I think he probably would be. I think it would have been sadly inevitable that he would move on. But I mean, given the way that he's progressed through the academy, he's now an England under-21 international. He's one of the best young players in the Championship. He is someone who is Premier League bound at some point, but I do think that Middlesbrough may have a little bit of time on their hands after the injuries that he suffered last season. He's going to have a little bit of a point to prove, and so I think he will be part of Middlesbrough's plans moving forward. Lath, I did mention as well. He arrived last summer from Atlanta. I think we're his parent club. He arrived for 4 million. Took a little while to get going. Showed little glimpses of promise along the way, but over the last couple of months of the season just looked absolutely unplayable. From my point of view, I've got a season ticket in the East Stand. He looked like a completely different beast in those last couple of months of the season. He was scoring goals. His finishing was undoubtedly top quality. But I think more than that, you could see the confidence building in him. The more goals that he was scoring, the more he was kind of puffing his chest out on the pitch and demanding more of his teammates, and he was ordering those around him to like get the ball to him. People like Finn Azaz, people like Izzy Jones. He was really sort of leading from the front, which was great to see, because it was a little bit of a throwback to I guess the noughties when you looked at people like Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, who was just barking orders at Stewie Downing in those days of the UEFA Cup, and we're starting to see a little bit of that of Latte Lath. He's clearly a very likable guy, but he's someone who's very demanding of himself, very demanding of those around him, and so I think Middlesbrough fans will be hoping that they can see more of that going into next season. Kieran Scott has been in doing the media rounds over the last couple of weeks. He spoke to BBC Tees about the prospect of interest in his players. He also spoke to Teesside Live and addressing those. I'll read out the quotes of what he said to Teesside Live. So he said, it's vital about keeping players. He said, I don't mind saying that. I can't control what other clubs may do or may not do, but from our position, we don't want to lose anyone. The only chance we're going to have of going up the season is keeping our best players. I speak to Steve Gibson regularly, and he's as strong and fiery on this as I've ever heard him in terms of us keeping players here. I can't stop if somebody offers money that the club has to look at. Hopefully they don't, because we don't want to lose anyone. We want to build around the guys we've got, add players at that level and higher, and really challenge this year. The only way we're going to do that is keeping the players that we have. So a very clear response from Kieran Scott. There is an acknowledgement in there, I guess, that if the price is right, the Middlesbrough will look to move players on. I think that's just absolutely natural, given, as I mentioned before, the sort of Moneyball sort of system. Every player has their price. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Kylian Mbappe, whoever it might sort of be. Every player has their price, and so that's no different for Middlesbrough. So should a club come in and offer 40 million for Latte Lath, the club are going to be stupid not to accept it there and then. But I think they know the value of their players. They are wanting to keep them, and so the only way that these players would move on is if top dollar was offered for them. Would any of those players attract top dollar this summer? Time will tell, but I don't think any of them are going to be forcing through a move. I think all three of them quite settled on Teesside. All three of them have a point to prove going into the new season for different reasons. And so I think as far as Middlesbrough are concerned, they can sit relatively comfortably in the knowledge that three of their most exciting players should hopefully be around for the start of the new season in August. Now, of course, while Middlesbrough have already done a couple of deals this summer, we've mentioned about Michael Carrick's new contract, Johnny Howson's new contract, the fact that we brought you Luke Ayling in on a permanent basis. Middlesbrough will be looking to make a number of new signings themselves going into the next couple of months. But I think compared to previous years, what is encouraging is that it feels like there's a real kind of concrete plan. The last couple of years, or maybe the couple of years before that, has felt like a real sort of scattergun approach where there's been no sort of clear strategy from the fans' point of view anyway, with regards to what positions are being targeted. It's just been a bit of a sort of Hail Mary, go out there, try and find whatever talent we sort of can, whatever position they fall into, we'll kind of make it work and we'll move things around and try and do it that way. This summer it feels like there's going to be a much more targeted approach to the transfer business that's been done. Now, I guess you've got to look back 12 months to last summer. The club enjoyed a huge turnover in players. I think from looking at it, it was 12 players were signed last summer, but 15 players departed, including the loan players like Cameron Archer and Ryan Giles, who moved on. So that was a huge turnaround in the playing squad. And so it was no real surprise that as the season got started, it was sort of riddled with inconsistency and players who showed their quality in fits and starts, but were kind of adapting to the league and that sort of thing. Middlesbrough were able to kind of ride that out, I guess. It was sort of that kind of typical season of a consolidation, that typical season of transition where the club were just kind of trying to bed these players in, trying to do it for the long-term future of the club, I guess, signing players who were actually their players, who were the club's assets, who can be sold in the future should the club decide to, rather than having players who were just brought in on loan from clubs in the Premier League and elsewhere. So last season was a little bit chaotic from that point of view, with so many players coming in, so many players leaving. But it feels like this summer they've wanted to get that bit out of the way, and now it's a much more targeted approach to the way that the club are going to do things. I think some players may move on this summer. I think there's been suggestions that people like Anthony Dijksteel might move on. There might be a couple of higher profile players moving on. Obviously, Paddy McNair left at the end of his contract. A couple of others who were out of favour might leave on permanent deals as well. But in terms of players coming in, it seems like the club are looking for between 3 and 5 first-team players to come in. Luke Ayling's already come into the team, slotted into that right back. That's a big tick there, because that's a position that a lot of people have wanted strengthening for a little while. There's been three key positions which have been spoken about a lot in the media, from Kieran Scott and from people like Craig Johns at Teesside Live and the lads at the Northern Echo. They've been talking about a central midfielder coming in. Lewis O'Brien was obviously on loan last season, but the talk is that the club want a different profile, a central midfielder, someone who, reading between the lines, might be a little bit more defensive minded. For me, probably someone who comes in as a bit more of a shithouse. I think from my point of view, looking at Middlesbrough's midfield last season, they were just a little bit nice. There was no sort of like grit or hostility in that central midfield, which is something that I thought we were personally missing. So I would like to see that in a central midfielder coming in, someone who just kind of adds a little bit of defensive stability, and maybe would allow someone like Hayden Hackney to play a slightly freer role and move forward. So that would be what I'd be looking for, sort of more defensive-minded central midfielder. There's talk of a versatile forward coming into the club. Reading between the lines, that looks to me like someone who could possibly play along that sort of front three, someone who can play on the left flank, someone who might play on the right flank, someone who might play in that number 10 sort of role, kind of challenging the likes of Finn Azaz, possibly Riley McGree, possibly Izzy Jones, but it's also someone who can play as a centre forward as well. Sam Greenwood was the player who was tasked with doing that last season, and he did offer versatility. We saw him in a number of different positions, which was something which probably didn't help him, to be honest. It wasn't it was an all right loan spell that he had at the club. He wasn't perfect by any means. He showed moments of real quality along the way, but I just couldn't really find his feet. And I think for me, that's something that Sam Greenwood will need to work on moving forward, just sort of nailing down that position, because his versatility was almost something that led to his time at Middlesbrough being a little bit underwhelming from that point of view, because he was largely playing off the left, which is not his position. He's played as a striker at different points in his career. He's played as a central midfielder, he's played as a 6, he's played as an 8, he's played as a 10, he's played as an 11 off the left. So he just doesn't really have a sort of nailed down position. But I think Middlesbrough will be looking for someone who is more comfortable playing in a couple of those different positions, someone who can play as a number 10, someone who can play on the left. And something that we're seeing from Michael Carrick, and something that he said, is that he likes players who can come in and offer different options for him, players who can come in and fit into different roles within the team to give him that sort of fluidity to change things from a tactical point of view, but also, like last season, if there's that many injuries, someone who can do a job in 2 or 3 different positions. And that's something that he'll be looking to do with this versatile forward. The final position that we definitely know that Middlesbrough will be looking at is a new striker. It's a position that Middlesbrough have been looking for a long while now. I think since Cameron Archer left last summer, the hope was that we'd be able to replace him with a top quality striker. Chuba Rakpom obviously ended up leaving as well. So Latte came in, and as I mentioned before, he really kicked on in the second half of the season and showed exactly what he's about. I do think we're a quality striker short of where we need to be at the moment, which is clearly something that the club are looking to improve on. Lath will be probably the first choice striker at the club. I know that we've got people like Marcus Force, who tends to play on the right but can play as a centre forward. Josh Coburn is another player who showed little glimpses of what he can sort of do. He struggled with injury a little bit last season as well, so the suggestion seems to be that he will still be in and around the first team picture, and that they wouldn't want to bring in someone who is going to kind of hamper his development, because they still want him to be in and around the first team and playing a good amount of minutes. But bringing someone in who was a bit more of a natural goal scorer and a bit more of a natural competitor for Lath in that centre forward role, or someone who can offer something slightly different, that seems to be the real priority. Now, there could be talk of a couple of other players coming in terms of the positions that they'd be coming in for. I'm not entirely sure, but I guess, again, that could depend on players leaving the club. I mentioned before about 3 players who are attracting a lot of interest. The hope will be that Middlesbrough won't lose Berg or Hackney or Lath, but should Hackney move on, the club will need to then sign a second central midfielder to make sure that we're not light of options in that area. If Berg moves on, we'll probably need to bring in another defender or someone who can slot into that role and add a little bit more competition at centre-back as well. Those two, I guess, slots in terms of signings, those 4th and 5th signings of the summer, they could be seen as more development signings. People I guess if you look back to last summer, people like Sammy Silvera or Alex Gilbert, types of players who will come in and supplement the first team and will be given an opportunity to show what they can do, but might not be seen as sort of like first team regular players. So I think as far as Middlesbrough are concerned, it's a summer which is going to be very, very exciting. The fact that we do seem to have a bit more of a nailed on plan of what we're looking to do in the transfer market is very, very encouraging. It means that we're very much on a proactive footing. We're a club who are going out and trying to find the players that we want to sign, and we're not just sort of reacting to what the market's doing or what players kind of become available. So I think for Middlesbrough, I think with these things combined, it's a very, very exciting time. I know it's only the start of June. The start of the new season feels a long, long time away, which I find absolutely painful at this time of year. But I think as far as Middlesbrough fans are concerned, there's a lot to look forward to going into the start of the new season. So let me know what you think. If you have enjoyed this video, then please do like. Please do comment below with what you think Middlesbrough still need to do this summer. And of course, hit subscribe as well for more Middlesbrough content, but more content from around the EFL as well, which I'm trying to do a bit more of as well. So yeah, really look forward to see more of you, and up the Boro.